stuck between a libertarian and a Republican? Welcome to Publitarian Podcast.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. This is Ronald Johnson, Publitarian, coming at you again with another episode of Publitarian Podcast, and we are up to episode number 69.
69.
I know. We're all 13-year-old boys at heart. So here we go, episode number 69. I believe I'm going to call this episode In the Weeds Cutting Vines. Or maybe Cutting Vines in the Weeds. Not sure yet. But before I get to the main meat of the episode, I would be remiss if I did not address the President's State of the Union address. I am, at the time of recording this podcast, the State of the Union address was last week, so this is probably old news to a lot of you, but I still feel the need that I should cover what I consider to be one of the greatest State of the Union addresses I had ever heard. In case you're living under a rock, President Trump delivered the 2020 State of the Union address before Congress, and like I said, it was just one of the best ones I'd ever heard. He just knocked it out of the park. I mean, he touched on everything that needed to be touched on, crossed all the T's, dotted all the I's. For all you Trump haters out there, he was very presidential, didn't go off script, and just stuck to it, and it was amazing. Just a really good State of the Union speech. Obviously, one of the highlights for me was the Godfather himself, Rush Limbaugh, getting the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and that is a big deal. For those of you who don't, I do have a younger audience as well, so maybe those of you who don't know who Rush Limbaugh is, he is pretty much the godfather, like I said, of the conservative media movement. He came before Fox News or anything. It was Rush Limbaugh on a radio station versus 3 news networks. Like I said, for younger listeners, they can't fathom the fact that there was only 3 news networks. That's all we had: NBC, ABC, CBS. And spoiler alert, they were all liberal, and they still are. So it was Rush Limbaugh versus them. People thought when he first started doing this talk radio thing, he was going to be talking about conservative politics. Everybody thought he was nuts. And he started in 1988, and he's still growing listenership as we speak. And, 30 years into this, I know I'm giving the Godfather a lot of accolades here, but the reason I'm doing so is because I wouldn't have a podcast. I wouldn't believe a lot of what I believe. I wouldn't think a lot of what I think, and I wouldn't be the person I am today without Rush Limbaugh's influence. Politics aside, he's got a good work ethic. He has his Rush Limbaugh's undeniable truths of life that applies to just life in general, politics aside. Just a really good man and very powerful, influential speaker, and still is. Unfortunately, he got diagnosed with advanced lung cancer, and he made that announcement a few weeks ago on his show. But it was a sad announcement, and all of us here at Publitarian Podcast wish Rush the best, and we're praying for him, and we just hope for a speedy recovery. Thanks for doing what you do, Rush. Speaking of the State of the Union address, I'm sure any of you that watched it, or even if you didn't watch it, you heard the news of Speaker Nancy Pelosi tearing up the speech that she was handed. This is like the transcript that the president goes off of, and she gets a copy of that. Vice President gets a copy as well, I believe. And so he follows the script, she follows along. So as an act of la résistance, she tore up the speech when he was done giving the speech. 2 funny things about this. A good cameraman caught the fact that she had pre-torn the speech. So she had plans to tear the speech in this big political theater act, and that's pretty much all of Democrat and liberal politics. It's all political theater. Everything is planned. Everything is calculated to what they're wearing, to what they're saying, to what they're doing. Everything is scripted. Everything is scripted. So she had a little tear in the speech ready to go. So when Trump gave his sign off, God bless America, she could stand up, rip the speech in two, and then be a liberal icon hero and try to save her failed legacy. Like I said, an entrepreneurial cameraman caught that, and now we all know the truth. And then I believe it was TPUSA did a video mashup of her tearing up the speech while Trump was talking about the little girl getting the scholarship, the soldier coming home to his family, one of the few surviving Tuskegee Airmen from World War II, and they kept montaging her tearing up the speech to that, to which she responded on Twitter, very hatefully, and we can't believe the people on the right would stoop this low. And I'm like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? You guys on the left are all about political theater. What they're really pissed about is that the right is starting to use the left's tactics against them, which I've been saying we need to do for years, and I'm glad people are stepping up to do it. And I think, once again, that is the gift of Trump, that he is that catalyst that made it okay for people on our side of the aisle to get rid of this false decorum that, like, we need to be the people that has the moral compass while the other people continue to stomp all over us. And I'm glad we have finally got to that point as a political movement. So, Godspeed to us. And slow speed to Nancy. I don't know. I guess she'll continue to keep moving slower as long as we keep the alcohol in her. I'm kind of being hypocritical. Speaking of alcohol, the Publitarian drink of the day is a Blue Moon iced coffee blonde. It's good. Tastes like beer, tastes like iced coffee. Two of my favorite things. So that was Nutty Nancy. Another quick topic. As much as I am disenchanted by the Q movement, I saw a very cool post that had a really good line that spoke to me, and I thought I would share it with you guys. I can't remember where I saw it. It was just somewhere on the interwebs, and one of the social medias, probably Instagram. It was from Q, and it said, "The Democrats do not celebrate you doing well." That was referencing the State of the Union speech. Whenever Trump was delivering this good news on jobs, on our economy roaring, even a little black girl getting a scholarship, the Democrats refused to stand. They refused to clap for anything, with the exception of Sinema. Sinema stood up and clapped for a couple things. But that really spoke to me. That is the state of our politics. Democrats do not celebrate you doing well. And also, speaking of Q, there is a clip that I saw today of what looked like to be a reporter asking the president about Anonymous. Now, he did not say Q, he just said Anonymous. And Trump says that he didn't want to talk about it, basically, but you'd be surprised if you knew who it was. I'm paraphrasing, but for all you people in the Q-universe, yes, I just coined that, Ronald Johnson, TM. For all of you people in the Q-universe, that will be a validation for you guys. So, bully for you. Bully! Now, on to the meat of the topic that I wanted to talk about today. Or should I say vegetation, since I'm going to be talking about weeds and vines. Ronald, what are you talking about, weeds and vines? How is this tying into anything regarding culture, life, politics, yada yada? Oh, just stay with me, awesome listener, and I will make sense of all this. I was thinking about the state of our republic the other day, and I was thinking about property maintenance. I don't know how many of you have ever done property maintenance, and when I say property maintenance, I don't mean, like painting your house or whatever. It could be anything. It could be mowing the lawn. It can be pulling weeds. But anyone that's ever done any kind of yard work or property maintenance knows that it's a constant fight and a constant struggle to keep everything maintained and beautiful and good for the next person, the next generation, if you will. A lot of our generation and the boomer generation and Americans in general are guilty of not doing proper care and maintenance of this country. We've led an influx of people into this country that do not share the same values and have no desire to assimilate into our unique culture. And before people start shouting at me about racism and everything else, this isn't a racist statement I'm making. I'm talking about actually just assimilating into American culture. Because I'm going to be talking about assimilation externally as well as internally in the country. It has nothing to do with your race. It has everything to do with how you treat the country. Now, that's just addressing what's coming into the country. Now, what is being birthed in the country? Well, there's a lot of anti-American sentiment. There is not a proper teaching of the history of the country. There's not a proper teaching of civics, economics, any of that stuff. And the reason I say it like that is because the reason I'm using property maintenance and like mowing your lawn and painting your house, pulling weeds, is because things like weeds and vines, they grow. They grow very, very, very slowly, and they just intertwine themselves into every fabric of the piece of property that they're growing on. And they grow so slow, so subtle, that you don't even realize it until you look around one day and your entire yard and your property is engulfed in vines and weeds with no hope in sight. And that's what I feel like has happened to this country. We've let Marxism and leftism creep in like vines into every corner, every crevice of our republic. Education, administration, yes, even the military. I was awakened about how liberal the actual top brass of our military is. Like institutional liberals at the top. Which swerves me back into my other podcast I did about the admin. The people that have that bureaucratic and top-up mentality are always the people that get picked for those jobs, and it's no different in the military. Any kind of admin. If you want to succeed and move up the ranks, you have to have like this globalist, either Marxist or bureaucratic attitude. And the reason I bring this up is all of us, because Zoomers like to point at boomers like to point at millennials, and my generation, Generation X, just likes to sit back with a martini and laugh at all the generations, but Gen X is guilty as well. We're all partly guilty of not doing the property maintenance and letting vines grow. And what do I mean by that? I mean, when we first saw the education system turning, should have stopped it. When we first started seeing liberalism happening in media, we should have stopped it. We've had all of these cultural cues, and instead of fighting back culturally, because Andrew Breitbart famously said politics is downstream of culture, we've just let the vines grow. And we are only now in 2020 as a political movement, when I say we, I mean common sense people. I don't even mean right wingers anymore. I mean just people with common sense that are not crazy batshit insane. We have finally awakened. The problem is we have awakened and we are on our property, the United States of America, and we're looking around and there's vines and trees and the grass is 5 feet tall and the paint is chipping off of the house and the porch is caving in. And so now I'm praying that we can do our property maintenance before our property, i.e. the country, is destroyed. And honestly, not to be a Debbie Downer, I don't know if it's too late or not. I mean, we're starting to see some cultural shift now. The Zoomer generation is starting to reject what their parents stood for. And as I discussed this with the Events Dow, some of that is just teenage rebellion, which is fine. We're a country of rebels. Be a rebel. That's great. And then some of it, I think, is just good old-fashioned common sense, where the left side of the aisle has moved so far to the left that it's making people that we would normally go, no, you're a lefty, making them look right of center. We have classical liberals like Dave Rubin and people like them jumping ship from the left side of the aisle all the time, coming over to our side of the aisle. So just now we're surrounded with all these vines and weeds, and our house is caving in. And just now we've finally awakened and said, "Oh crap, we need to do some property maintenance." I don't know if it's too late or not, to be honest. Like I said, I hate to be a Debbie Downer about it. I'm doing my part here. I'm letting my voice be heard on my podcast, which is over 4,000-ish downloaders now. Thank you so much for that, by the way. Red Pilled America is another podcast that's doing that's using emotional arguments as well as fact-based arguments, because a lot of times people on our side of the aisle are all on that Shapiro train of facts don't care about your feelings, which is true. But as when I had Vegan Patreon on a couple episodes ago, she said feelings don't care about your facts either, and I thought that was a great line. Because if you are trying to make a factual argument to a person that's not logical or a person that's driven by their emotions, it's going to fall flat. So I don't see anything wrong with making emotional arguments. Because if facts don't care about your feelings and feelings don't care about your facts, we're not going to be able to talk to each other. So culturally, we're starting to get that. And when I say we, I mean the free thinkers, the right-wingers, the libertarians, the Republicans, the publitarians like myself. We're starting to get that. We're starting to make these emotional arguments as well as fact-based arguments. I'm seeing our side of the aisle reach out to the black community like we've never reached out before. And it's a tragedy, by the way, that we kept, when I say we, like I said, everybody on our side of the aisle kept making these logical appeals to black America and not meeting them where they are or where they were. But you've got warriors now like King Face, who is just straight up hood, and he'll tell you he's hood, doing all these lives and podcasts and like meeting people where they are. Maj Tour, the Black Guns Matter guy, and of course Candace Owens, making these cultural shifts. So we are now starting to reach out and do these cultural things. I mean, some of us are swinging and missing too, and I'm not going to mention any names because then I would be doing them a disservice. But we're at least trying now. We're at least trying to breach this cultural bastion that's been owned by the left for so long. And I'm glad of it because it has been needed. So, nobody likes doing property maintenance. Nobody likes, well, almost nobody. I've got a mother-in-law that loves doing outside yard work and pulling weeds and yada, yada, yada. So, I mean, there are some sickos out there that like to do it, but most people don't like doing it. And I think that's been the problem with the right for decades. It's uncomfortable. It's hard work doing this cultural movement, this cultural shift, digging in and pushing back against the tyrannical left. Because it's property maintenance. You were on your hands and knees pulling weeds. When they grow up, you have to pull the weed out. And that's why I think this analogy works, because none of us really have wanted to do it. A lot of us are guilty of spinning the country in motion, watching it work, watching it go forward, and watching it prosper, and then going, okay, cool, I'm done here. Like, especially the boomer generation, like, they're all old and tired now. They don't want to do this anymore. They're like, okay, well, we did our thing. Now it's time to collect our Social Security. Hopefully it's there, and retire and leave it to everybody else. And we've had generations doing that now, all the way back to the greatest generation, the World War II generation. So, while I've done some Debbie Downer and said, I hope it's not too late, let me also give you some encouragement. We are starting to pull the weeds. We are starting to fight this culture war at least semi-competently and properly now. And we may be able to save this piece of property yet. The great United States of America. Anyway, I think that will do it for me on this edition of Publitarian Podcast. If you want to reach out to me, you can. Email, I am publitarian@gmail.com or thepublitarian@gmail.com. I'm on all the social medias. The only one I check consistently is Instagram. The rest I just update when I update them. But I am on Minds and Gab and all the others. And also, your boy is very recently, on TikTok because I'm such a cool kid. And I'll be posting some videos on there as well. And also, obviously I'm Publitarian on TikTok as well. So that will do it for me on this edition of Publitarian Podcast. Continue to pull the weeds, continue to mow the grass, continue to paint the house, and let's get this property back in order. Thanks for listening, you guys.
You've been listening to Publitarian Podcast, copyright 2020.